Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians. And your host, the Solo Manava. Today, I want to talk about um, developing our own standards of how we want to show up, be it at work, be it in personal relationships, be it in certain situations. How do we usually want to show up? That's really what I would love to talk about it. And before that, I want to share some of my amazing moves so that you are part of this process as well of my growth. So, as you remember that I have started this in-person supporting female entrepreneurs here in Trieste, where I have been living lately, and that has been going so amazingly. I did a coaching session for them in a group this week, and it was just so great to talk to some powerful women from different countries from Italy. So that's like one of the interesting developments that's happening. The other one is I have started group coaching with refugees yesterday, and that was amazing too, seeing how um, refugees' dreams and what they want to do, how they want to achieve it, and being very determined, and at the same time, like working on some of the problems that I never even like thought about solving in my life. So that's why how they're doing it is so impressive. So that's what's going on when it comes to my um, projects that I love working on outside of coaching my amazing humanitarians. So, the topic that I want to come to today is talk about standards that we can develop for ourselves, and they don't even need to be like something written or something formal, or it's not just like set of rules or set of levels that we want to keep for ourselves when it comes to how we behave, how we show up at work or with in a relationship with someone or in a particular situation. Now that we have really like gotten being professionals, doing a lot of professional things as humanitarians, right? We know that there are a lot of standards around our work, but I think what would be very useful for many of us to think about, like, how do we want to keep our standards of how we want to show up at work and we don't divert from it no matter what the situation is, no matter who's behaving how, and all of these things, right? So I will give you several examples of how this could look like and how like you can visualize it. But I really want you to use these examples as a way for you to also think about how you could think about for yourself what your standards are. So I will give you a couple of examples. One example is one of my amazing humanitarian clients. She had been struggling a lot with the new management, new leadership, even though she's in a very high position. But she had new change of senior leadership, and therefore she was really hoping that they will help her solve a lot of the structural issues and make some decisions, clear TORs, and all of these things, right? And then what she noticed as the new management came over is that they were very busy in politics of like talking to whom, not talking, and all of these things. And just she just felt like that's not how I do things. That's not my way of working. That's not my way of functioning in the office, in the workplace. And therefore, she always thought of, okay, this is my standard of how I want to work. And as if I see that other people are wanting me to divert or to change or like to go on board with them, and therefore just like being busy in this office politics instead of making decisions, she's saying my standard of working is not that. I don't want to be part of that, and therefore I want to keep my standard the way that I like, right? And I think the great thing about that is that so when we think about standard in her case, what that really entails is that she's saying that she's very professional, she's very assertive, she's very clear, she's very good at making decisions, creating clarity structures in the most efficient way. This is her standard of working, and the way that we were even joking that she works with the standard of a Ferrari, or I don't remember which car we said, but you know what I mean. And the other person or the others that we were expecting to come with their Ferrari and then us meeting together. And if that's not happening, then we can still go for keeping our standards instead of lowering it, or instead of like dropping it and going to the other side of, oh, the way that we do things now is different, and then we just go off and do those things, right? So that's one example. The other example that I have been discussing with one of my other amazing humanitarian clients yesterday about standards in her relationship, in her personal relationship. And she was like, we were discussing this. How does she want to show up in her personal relationships, especially when things get very tough, or because she's starting a new relationship, and there are a lot of discussions that she was having around having children, and the situation is not easy, but we were discussing yesterday as to how she can still continue having her standard of, this is how I would like to lead relationship. This is how I want to be in a relationship. And then if you can't, that's okay. Then let's just discuss it honestly, instead of me keep like giving up all the things that are important to me, and then just go on board with the other person's important things, right? Because one of the things that she was discussing with her new partner is him introducing her to his family, and his family being very conservative and traditional, and therefore not really him not really not knowing how to introduce her. And then she was telling him that the standard, or the way that I want to lead relationship, is where there is no secrecy, right? The way that I want to lead relationship is, I want this to be honest, and I want always to tell what's important to me in a relationship. And then if you can't really do that, that's fine. I have no like judgment, or I have no way of holding on to you and saying don't leave me, or don't we can like, there are certain things that we have a standard for, so to say, right? And we don't want to divert from them. Anything above those standards, we can always discuss things, but there are certain like minimum standards that we have for ourselves that we don't want to go below from those, so to say. And in her case, her standard of leading personal relationship is being honest, transparent, no secrecy, standing up by each other, and having these discussions, but also at the same time, not really saying now you have to do it, but rather, this is how I would like to do it. And if you want to do it with me, amazing. If not, great, then let's just go our separate ways, right? So that's where the standard is so useful. So I was thinking that how could we make these type of standards for not only workplaces, our personal relationships, excuse me, but also for ourselves, right? Like, if you think about it, we have already a lot of our standards, like when it comes to material things, right? When it comes to things that we can see, that we can touch. Maybe we have standards of this is the type of clothing I wear, or the standard of this is the type of shoes I wear, or this is the type of restaurant I go to, or this is the type of um, places I go to, right? So we all have our own, like, whether we recognize it or not, we have our own ways of filtering through and say, this is the thing I go to, this is the thing I don't go to, this is just how we function. But now when it comes to how we treat ourselves, how we interact with ourselves, the same we can do a standard for how we minimally treat ourselves. And the way that we could do it, so here are my suggestions that I would like to suggest is, so certain self-victory is not allowed, right? So just the way that when we talk to other people, and if they were like criticizing us in that level, or if they were uh, shouting at us, if they were discriminating us, we know that we would not allow that to happen most of the time, or we know we would do something about it. But when it comes to our own self, we tend to be very harsh on ourselves, right? So therefore, what if we had our own standard of this is how I want to function? This is how the minimum that I expect of myself to function, and anything below, I don't allow it, right? So for instance, I tell myself that I don't really like entertain and be involved in self-pity. I don't like when other people do it. Why should I like when I do it myself, right? So therefore, my standard is that if I talk to myself, I talk to myself in the most constructive way. I also talk to myself in a way that, okay, what am I going to do and how am I going to solve it and go for a solution instead of sitting in the complaining and this energy. And the same, so my standard of communication is never sitting in the complaining or powerless energy or oh my God, what am I going to do and how am I going to do kind of way, but rather, okay, this is what happened. I don't want to blame myself or I don't want to blame anyone else because that's not part of my standard. And I want to solve this or I want to decide what to do with it and then move on, right? So therefore, the way that I think about my standards of like living, showing up for myself, showing up for work, showing up with my clients is that I don't really allow myself to be being victim of my own choices. I don't really go into like feeling powerless a lot, even though sometimes does happen. But I always know that my standard of showing up for my own life, showing up for myself, is that I don't really want to go to the side of victimy or powerless or complaining or blaming energy because I know that that's never going to bring any solution. Therefore, I always think about this is how I roll. These are the ways like I roll the way to make powerful decisions, acting on them, and making certain results happen instead of indulging in all of this, right? So that will be my standard when I am like talking to myself, when I am treating myself. The same goes for showing up at work with my clients, right? So my standard is that I always want to get them to the biggest results they can imagine, or maybe they can't even imagine. I really want to get them to the biggest results, whatever that is for them, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, and how can we like get her to remove all the limitations that she or he have put themselves on themselves, and instead focus on this is where we're going and this is how we're going, and let's go for the maximum of what you believe you can achieve. Let's go for that instead of sitting in the nitty-gritty or in the small things. That's why my standard of working with clients is that, right? And also my standard of working with clients is that I want to work with clients who actually love working with me. Otherwise, we can't really go and work on those big results, right? So therefore, you can see that for everything that we do, we usually have like standards of how we want to behave, how we want to show up. And the same way that I would love to suggest for you to do this when it comes to your work. And here are several suggestions that I would love to make for you to think about to include in your standards. So one of the elements of standards that you could include is always decide, always feel in charge of how you want to show up at work, no matter how others are showing up. And I think that's one of the biggest thing that we tend to suffer from is we tend to go and keep reacting to how others are showing up, keep wondering or telling ourselves it's unfair or this is not how it should be or this is how it should be. We tend to spend and waste a lot of our energy on those type of things, and unless we're actually doing and solving those things, we just keep talking about it is not going to help anyone, especially ourselves, right? So therefore, if we don't want to be suffering from people's behavior that we don't like, if we don't want to be suffering from just unfairness here, unfairness there, and this is not how it should be, and being in resistance, if we don't want to suffer from those things, then let's not indulge in them. Let's not keep being in that environment or in that stew. It feels like stew to me. And if we're not wanting there, then how can we continue showing up and behaving and doing the things that we want to, advocating for things that we want to, working on the things we want to, keeping up our own standards of how we want to show up, no matter how others show up? Because imagine the analogy would be that if, let's say that everyone came to work with very dirty clothing, like inappropriate clothing, and or maybe some of the people came nude or like half naked or whatever it is, we wouldn't just go off and like simulate them usually, right? We wouldn't just say, oh yeah, no, apparently everything is allowed and I'm gonna do this as well. We will always be like, well, my standard of showing up at work or my standard of how I wear what I wear at work is this. I don't want to lower it or make it different just because others are doing it, right? So then why not the same when it comes to our emotional state, when it comes to our way of showing up, when it comes to our professionalism? Why not do the same? So therefore, if you can add anything to your standard, the best or the biggest thing that I would suggest for you to put is decide how you want to show up. Do you want to show up powerfully, committed, determined? Mm, Going all in, but on the results, on the creating the impact you want. If you want to show up that way, no matter how others show up, no matter how your supervisor shows up, no matter how your colleagues show up, then you will always be in charge of how you keep going in your own lane to creating the impact you want to. And the best thing about that type of behavior or the type of decision you can make is that you will lower the influence of others on you. You will no longer be like entertaining or keep thinking about why others are not this, why am I this? All of these things you no longer be entertaining, but rather you'll be focusing on the most important. And also the side effect of these type of behaviors that I have seen in my experience is that then people really like working with you. And people not only like working with you, they actually offer you to work with you in the future. And they offer you positions that you never even thought that you qualified for. That's what happened to me when I got the Mariupol position in Ukraine, right? I never thought that I would even get that position. I didn't even think that that was a position that I could go for, but because I was so focused on this is how I want to show up, this is how I want to work, this is how I want to create the impact, these are the ways I want to support my team and support partners and support the people that we're serving. Because of that focused energy of keep going for the result, that life or universe has rewarded me with heading the office in Mariupol, which I'm very grateful for. Right, so that you can see that when we have our own standards of this is just how I want to do, and everyone else can behave the way they want to, then it just becomes so much more clear as to what we're in charge of, what we're not in charge, what can we control, what can't we control. It becomes so much more clearer and easier to navigate through instead of just trying to keep looking at who's behaving and who's not behaving and all of these things. The other element that I would love for you to add in the standard that you want to develop, if you allow me, is the standard of non-control. And I think that's something that sounds very logical, but I think oftentimes many of us don't do. And a reason many of us don't do is we believe that if we can control, then we are safe, right? And that comes from a survival energy or survival brain of ours. So, for instance, if we say, I really need to like impress other people around me, and if I don't, they're not gonna like me or they're not gonna support my career or whatever it is. And then we just become in this place of trying to like guess and understand who's thinking what and how and all of these things, and then we just keep being busy that way, even though we should understand that we can't influence other people's opinions unless they want to change themselves. So therefore, the best way you can influence other people's opinions by showing up the way you want to, right? By showing up the way you want to, working on the results that you want to work on, creating the impact that you want to. When you do those things and when you show up in your most professional self, then other people will respect you. They will see what you're doing, even if you don't need to show them. So therefore, controlling is unnecessary, right? So therefore, I would love to suggest to you that one of the standards that you can think of for yourself is, how can you keep my freedom autonomy at the same time giving other people their freedom and autonomy and not expect them to behave in ways that I believe they should. And it's very similar to the previous one. And the difference is that in the second one is we consciously on purpose don't try to control other people's behaviors with our actions, or we don't expect them to behave differently, or we don't try to do things to impress them so they like us or whatever. We just don't involve in all of this. The same goes with controlling certain outcomes, or we believe that if we don't behave in a particular way, our supervisor will write XYZ performance and then it will ruin our career or whatever it is. That's also another form of controlling. And if we let go of those controlling and focus on the first part of the standard, then we have nothing to worry. And if our supervisor is still going to write something because they don't like us or because they have their own issues or whatever, you still know deep inside that you have done your best, that you have done all the things that you find important. And if he or she had a problem with you, that's not your problem, because at least you have it clear for yourself. Your conscience is clear for yourself of how you have done this work, right? And the third element that I really want to, I suggest to you to think about to add to your standard is when you are working with certain personalities, especially people who are very challenging. Our brain usually wants us to avoid them, get away from them, not have any contact as much as possible. But I would love to suggest to you, what if we could use those occasions, those people, as a way for us to grow and therefore grow our self-concept of being professionals who can do and work with whoever we tend to be around in the team. And that's something that I have been working on even nowadays as I'm growing, as I'm like becoming bigger in terms of my impact. I really want to be working with more and more people, and where I no longer feel like, oh my God, this is a difficult person I rather avoid, or like, in other words, don't make decisions based on that fear, but or wanting to avoid, but rather opening up to these people and saying, my standard is I'm ready to work with whoever who is in my team or whoever is my supervisor, whoever that person is, because I know how to work with them. I know how to set my boundaries. I know how to communicate with them. I know how to communicate in a way that feels powerful to me, that feels equal to me. instead of feeling like, oh, again this, again that, and I'm feeling powerless, right? So if you can add these three elements to your standard, I think you will be an amazing professional, even like thriving professional, more than maybe you are currently. So therefore, like you can even think of many other elements to add to it, but I really find that these type of ways of handling things, the ways of doing things, the ways of doing business, the ways of getting to a quality that we want to, excuse me, right? So we can even think about what kind of quality of work that I want to challenge myself to always bring myself to, right? And all of these standards then become even like higher and higher and higher. And then the more we go up in our careers, in our work, the more we like lift the bar up and up. And then we like don't really expect the other people to behave according to our standard, because that will be again controlling, right? But rather we just show them this is how we work, and then we invite them to come to our standards, or to invite them to lift up their standards to come to our standards, or to standards that they wish to, right? Without feeling angry or judgmental about others as to why they don't have standards or why they behave this way. We just don't indulge in that, because we have our standard of this is how I work, this is how I show up, this is how I solve problems, this is how I handle difficult situations, or working with challenging people. This is how I do things. And then we continue following them, even though our brain wants us to go to off rail to others, or keep indulging in things, emotions that we actually don't want to feel. So, my dears, I hope this has been helpful for you to think about creating, developing your own standard of this is how I show up. And if you would like to show up this way with me, amazing. If not, no worries. I'm going to continue showing up this way. That's really what I would love to help you develop and get to. So if you would like to work on this with me, come coach with me. I would love to get you to an amazing standards where you just feel in awe with yourself and like, yes, this is who I am. This is how I work. This is how I lead my relationships. And feeling so powerful, empowered, fulfilled with yourself as you go do those things. Have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you very soon.